As the legacies of our forebears are found, defended still by their satellites and laser grids, our cities disappear and our people dwindle. It is a time of war, and we are born to it. This is the age of the Sand Warrior.
Here I am again with another game I vaguely remember from my childhood, doing some archaeology on myself. I don't recall if I actually owned the full game or just had a demo, but when I started looking up obscure games to cover in this series, I encountered Sandwarriors and it instantly triggered memories of what may possibly have been my first exposure to the now common trope of science fiction ancient Egypt.
Indeed.
Those memories never went further than flying around a bit though, so I was eager to check it out again, only somewhat with the hope that there would be a lot of stupid stuff in it for video content, but mostly out of pure curiosity. So let's get started, shall we? Astros Productions was a small British game studio founded in 1982 by brothers George and Peter Carbulonis, releasing a bunch of games for various early personal computers, the VIC-20s, Spectrums, Commodores, and Amstrads, across the 80s and early 90s. As the PC games market consolidated into the PC games market, they focused their output entirely onto MS-DOS, porting a number of games for publishers Ocean and Gremlin Interactive, a company that somehow keeps popping up wherever I go. In 1994, they entered the third dimension with Retribution, a science fiction flight combat game featuring voxel terrain. 3 years later, Sandwarriors would ditch the voxels but be no less technically impressive, with Astros having created an entirely new engine for it called 3D-ality. In what seems to be a trend for the kinds of games I cover, it would end up being their last. Sales weren't great, and the ever-increasing cost of game development made the brothers decide to close up shop and look for opportunity elsewhere. It's not like reviews for the game were bad, they were perfectly fine really. Solid 7s all around. The bad sales could also be because it came out in the same year as X-Wing vs. TIE Fighter and Wing Commander Prophecy, or that the advertising looked like this. In my research, I found a very brief mention of a potential PlayStation version in the works. Would this have made a difference? Would it have been a big console hit and lead to sequels that would expand the lore and gameplay? Would the Carbulonis brothers have eventually been acquired by Gremlin, Interplay, or one of the big publishers, and been ground into dirt by their executives and decide to quit the industry anyway to protect whatever slivers of mental health they had left, only to see the world and characters they created be torn apart in endless cynical cash grab reboots and adaptations? Who's to say? Sandwarriors, The Battle for the Sun Throne, is a three-dimensional, mostly first-person mission-based ground-level flight combat Egypt-em-up, a bit more elaborate than previous garbage but interesting subject Helicops, and drawing obvious parallels to games such as Terminal Velocity and its follow-up Fury 3. Essentially, you'll be spending most of your time zooming around, shooting baddies, crossing the map, and completing objectives. The basic loop of the game is straightforward. You fly a single craft to the Scarab throughout the entire game over the course of a few dozen missions across different sectors of a handful of large, expansive maps. Unlike Helicops, you start your missions at an actual friendly base each time, where you must also return to after completing your goals. It's still nowhere near a simulator though. A particularly fun indignity if you fail your mission is that they still ask you to return to base before restarting. The maps are impressively large and open. It'll take you a few minutes to fly from one end to the other, but luckily your ship has a pretty good GPS system to help you navigate across the cities, smaller settlements, industrial areas, and unique geographical features as the missions require. The Scarab controls somewhere in between a jet fighter and a combat helicopter. It can go fast, turn quickly, hover, and go backwards. It's quite an agile little bug. I found mouse and keyboard controls to be overly sensitive, and though it would have felt real immersive, couldn't get my HOTAS to work right with it either. Luckily, DOSBox allows you to rebind almost every input to an Xbox controller, and using this setup, it was actually a pleasure to play. The game does give you hotkeys for pre-programmed maneuvers to help you out of binds, but since I was playing on the controller, I never used them. Although initially only equipped with the ancient extraplanetary Egyptian equivalent of a pea shooter, you gradually unlock more weapons for your craft as the game progresses. To be entirely honest, you'll only be using a few of them. Your pea shooter, the chain gun, is not so bad actually. Low damage, but it's hit scan, so you don't have to lead your shots. The heat-seeking missiles, though slow to fire, are your most reliable way to take down flying enemies especially. And the cluster missiles, which seem to do very little actual damage, do give you that oh so satisfying fire and forget barrage. Though the missions all eventually boil down to destroy the red stuff on the map, the game does a lot with the toolset it has. Sometimes you have to protect an allied ship from attackers. Sometimes all enemies are airborne, other times land-based tanks and bipedal mechs, and occasionally it's a swarm of bees for some reason. Sometimes you have to scour the map to disable all radar jammers before you can bomb a still in construction enemy carrier to oblivion. Sometimes the target is underground. Sometimes you're on your own deep in enemy territory, and other times you're just one fighter in a much larger skirmish. Most of the time, the actual objective area is just one or several small portions of the map, but you have to cross or avoid active battle sites to reach it, and then do the same on your return to the extraction point. Sometimes you're a big stinky dingus and die on the way to base after having cleared the objective. You live and learn. Because the objective of a mission is never more than kill all the baddies or protect this thing, you have a lot of freedom in how you approach the mission. Do you come in from the north or the west? Do you go over the mountain or through a canyon? There will also be plenty of non-mission critical enemies that respawn endlessly. Do you go after them to get some heat off your squad's back? Or do you not waste your ammo? Ammunition and energy and shield and health are limited, and you'll often find yourself having to do a tactical retreat to a nearby base or settlement to restock on ammo and shield energy. You can only do this so often, so studying the map and having a good understanding of your surroundings can be crucial to survive the more difficult missions. Speaking of difficulty, yeah, the game is kinda hard. But there's difficulty settings. Also, unlike Helicops, infinite lives and a proper save and load system. Hallelujah, praise Osiris? Cheats are available too if you know where to look, but only to increase the damage of your weapons. I may or may not have used these while recording. Subscribe and comment to find out. The futuristic yet ancient Egypt desert setting of Sandwarriors conjures up obvious comparisons to Stargate, Dune, and even the original Battlestar Galactica. But there's also a very Wing Commander-like modern military twist, with your commanding officer sounding like this.
Objective 1, Gable Ducon, locate site entrance.
And the briefings being more like something out of Operation Desert Storm than the mighty military of Egyptian-themed space aliens.
At 0600, Edfu signed the appropriate documents and allied with House Set. We believe this to be propaganda and suspect the city has been taken from within.
The constant references to ancient Egyptian terminology mediate this a little bit, but they often lay it on thick, and the contrast only makes you giggle more. The game's briefing sections don't just tell you what your mission is, they also give you hints and tips for your approach, and also serve as a debrief to go over the consequences of your last mission. In addition, it's a nice little breather in between battles, giving you a small glimpse of this civilization in the background. Visually, these and the occasional FMV clips are about as good as you could expect from this era and budget. No, they don't hold up, but they're not distractingly bad. They get the job done. Graphically, the game looks... I mean, I like it. 1997 seems a little late for DOS-only non-accelerated graphics, so I understand complaints from the time, but I for one love this unfiltered, crunchy mid-90s polygonal PC game look. Colors are bright, enemies and objects are easily identifiable, the map is clear, the skyboxes are pretty, the HUD does its job well, weapon effects are cool, there are large capital ships, detailed cities and bases, underground areas, good use of lighting, lots of vehicles driving and flying and walking around at all times, and missions that take place during the day and at night. Primitive? Yes, but very effective. My only real complaint is the draw distance. What I wouldn't give to be able to jump into the code and set that to infinite. The detail in the maps, though, is remarkable. Look at these little guys walking. And almost every single building is destructible. In 1997, there's plenty of artificial and natural landmarks to orient you on the large maps, and though the scale isn't exactly realistic, it all feels very designed and real enough. Look at the way this capital ship collapses. Sure, it flattens like a pancake, but very technically impressive for the time, so the effect works. The 3Dality engine could do some neat stuff. The game's sound is fine, not much to note. Pew pews and explosions and stuff, nothing that gets in the way. I never feel like I have much to say about a game's sound unless it's egregiously bad. The voices are kind of funny, yes, but they come through clear enough and serve their purpose.
Tactical Magna battle pods in operation.
The music is a little bleepy bloopy in that MIDI way that sounds kind of pitiable. But guess what? This DOS-only game came on CD-ROM only, and it actually has a full Red Book audio soundtrack, and it sounds great. It's a real shame that I couldn't figure out how to get it to work in-game.
We are warriors, one and all. For as long as we can remember, we have fought down the generations.
In the year 6225 before Christ somehow, the desert planet Tawi is divided between two great factions, the honorable Horus Empire and the scheming, evil, nasty, and so on House of Set. Set murdered his own brother, Osiris, Horus's papa, and now there's war. How positively Shakespearean! They're not just fighting for territory and honor, they're also fighting for Orion tech, powerful weaponry of an ancient civilization preceding their own. And on the game's website, and here alone, there's also the implication that Tawi is a dying planet, and that the two factions are also waging war for the right to colonize Earth in an attempt to save their people? There are implications here, of course. First is a little bit of ancient alien stuff. The eventual consequence of the war would be the victor colonizing Earth, and either being the origin of humanity as we know it, or intermingling with the already existing human population. Just like the other Battlestar Galactica. In any case, they'll end up building structures and using technology far, far inferior to their own, so it seems like it didn't all go according to plan anyway. The mentions of Tawi having its own lost advanced ancient civilization, and these are scant, also hint at some sort of cyclicality, which I'm sure would be thematically relevant if this world had gotten more room to breathe. Also, I'm wondering here, pure speculation, could the Sun Throne referenced in the game's subtitle be Earth? That'd be kinda cool, huh?
His honor was mine, and mine his.
You, the player, are an elite but low-ranking Sand Warrior, one of Horus's frontline soldiers and possibly a clone of him? It's your job to pilot the Scarab and shoot all the baddies and collect all the ancient tech and secure victory for the good guys. And that's what you do. There, I've just described the entire game's story to you. Just like with some of the previous games I've covered, maybe even more so than those, Sandwarriors comes with a very intriguing backstory, a defined world, a vision with lots of room for twists, turns, and future expansions on the lore. But in terms of the development of the world, there's just the progress of the war on a large scale, particularly as depicted in the briefing sections. In terms of character, you get a couple of promotions, maybe get a bit of a dressing down for canonically failing one mission, and that's it. You win some battles, you lose some battles, you win the war. There's no drama, there's no pathos, not much of an arc, just a straight line. And it's a shame. The mix of the ancient Egyptian lore and modern military lingo gives it a certain sense of being simultaneously epic, grand in scope, and grounded, personal. This is not just a war of the gods, it's battles fought by individual soldiers on their behalf. Very fertile ground for a character-based story. Interspersed between the missions, there are a handful of small cutscenes in which the narrator, possibly the player character himself, waffles on a bit about honor and the meaning of soldiering for the God Emperor as he gets his promotions and subsequent uniform upgrades. Doesn't do much for me, to be honest. It all feels very disconnected from what's going on. I was surprised when I saw the first one pop up more than an hour into the game. The final FMV is a little better. Horus bows to you, a sign of respect for the hard work you've put in. And then the narrator mentions how the Sand Warriors finally get to start families or something. Until the next war, baby!
Hang up their armors and make for themselves the families they were promised. That is, of course, until the next time.
One notable member of the dev team is game designer and scriptwriter Paul Green, who also played an important role in the development of the truly horrifying Realms of the Haunting and the interesting but kinda problematic Slipstream 5000. Other games from the Gremlin Interactive catalog that have sparked my interest. I just love finding connections like this, you know? It's a reminder that these games are made by people who have their own stories and journeys and links with each other. Is it a coincidence that this is a flight combat game like Helicops, and that it can be abbreviated to SW like Starwinder? Yes, yes it is. Everything is a coincidence. Always. If you would like to play this game, you don't have a lot of options. It's not for sale anywhere digitally as of the creation of this video, but big box copies seem to be plentiful and the glorious box art requires a double take to comprehend. Witness the background explosions, completely unrelated stock image fighter craft, King Tut's golden visage, and centrally, the black latex wearing figure in the stripper pose with big ol' rocket launcher pods on their shoulders, and then pull a face like this. Disc images are available on the internet if you know where to look, though you'd struggle to just drop it into DOSBox and hit play. This is where I take a minute to thank a wonderful little blog called The Collection Chamber, which not only catalogs many of these obscure old PC games, but also compiles them into easily installable, playable versions for download whenever possible. I'll definitely be consulting this website again in the future. Yo, they made an FMV adventure game based off of the 90s Arnold movie Eraser?
Where's this?
Sandwarriors: The Battle for the Sun Throne is a bit of a missed opportunity, I think. The moment-to-moment gameplay is solid, the maps are expansive, the graphics colorful and detailed, and the world created for the game has the potential to be genuinely fascinating and does enough to set it apart from being a straight Stargate or Dune ripoff. But it never quite coalesces. The desert environment gets repetitive, there is no real sense of progression, and your place in the story doesn't feel very impactful. All the pieces are there for a game that would be more fondly remembered, or remembered at all, by anyone. But like Snefru's Pyramid at Meidum, it just couldn't keep it all together. So it turns out that the game was both less interesting and not as garbage as I had expected. But I'm still happy to have taken this expedition, and to have described another fascinating artifact for you all. If this kind of mid-90s flight combat game appeals to you, give it a look. For everyone else, this video suffices, and you're welcome.